When I was president of the MIT Club of Boston, we offered a career management program called Success Without Stress. We actually had to cancel the program because I think people were too stressed out to sign up for it. And having been an officer in nonprofit organizations, I figured that I could more easily put on a program called Stress Without Success. I was a little reluctant to take on the role as president of the MIT Club of Boston because I looked at my fellow officers and I looked at my predecessors and I could see that they were very engaged, very passionate and involved in the organization, but like we were kind of it when it comes to the core of volunteers to run the organization, and we were kind of getting burned out. Does this sound familiar to anyone in here? Okay, good, so I'm not alone. This is a very typical scenario with many nonprofit and volunteer organizations, is that you lead very busy lives. You're very passionate and committed about being involved in this organization, but you just don't have time to step back and see who else you can get involved and engaged in your organization. So that's really what I'm going to talk about in terms of what I did at the MIT Club of Boston to start expanding and recruiting that base of leaders and volunteers. So initially that I thought it was fostering and developing shared leadership, but I thought maybe an alternative title might be banishing burnout, fostering success without stress, or at least trying to minimize stress. When I became president of the MIT Club of Boston, I worked with the board and we came up with 3 basic goals. One was to build membership by at least 10% of the alumni base in the Boston area, and you could guess, because we're in the Boston and Cambridge area, we have a fairly large base of alumni. We wanted to increase the number of activities and the number of alumni participating in those activities, and we wanted to recruit and develop a higher number of club volunteers and leaders. And that's the point that really focuses on the topic today of how do you foster that broader base of leaders and shared leadership. Within the first year, what we did was we met our membership goal, we tripled the number of activities, and we increased the number of volunteers 5-fold. Now, I did not do this alone. I had a lot of help in making this happen and working with the board to really develop the shared vision, shared goals, and a shared action plan of how we could get more people involved in the organization. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what are some of the things that I did that worked for us in the MIT Club of Boston. Some of these might be useful to you, some of them may not. Take what's useful and leave the rest. But I'm also going to put the tips and approaches that I use within the framework of a 4 capabilities leadership model that we use at the MIT Leadership Center. And so that as I'm going through these examples that I'm using, you're going to get a little theory and a little practical tips on how to apply that theory. So the 4 capabilities are: 1 is sense-making, which is really understanding the context in which you're operating. The second is relating, which is building effective relationships to get people engaged and involved in the organization and outside the organization, because you're not just working with the members, you're also working with other people and speakers and other people that you're getting involved in putting on your activities. And visioning, creating a compelling picture of the future of where you want to take the organization. And 4, inventing, developing new ways to achieve that vision. The 4 capabilities model was developed by 4 faculty at MIT Sloan. Deborah Ancona, who's the faculty director of the MIT Leadership Center, Peter Senge, Tom Malone, and Vonda Orlikowski. And what they did is synthesize a lot of their years of experience with leaders and organizations and incorporating the ideas and research that was done by other leadership scholars. And what they do is they don't focus on leader as an individual or as a person, but instead focus on a set of capabilities and capacities that leaders and that individuals and groups possess. So it really focuses on what leaders do. And it's a very simple framework by design so that you can move more quickly into action, which is what we like to do at MIT. The first of these is sense-making. Now, sense-making is just what it sounds like. It's making sense of your environment and really answers the question, what's going on here? And when the faculty studied successful, effective leaders, they found out that they engage in a lot of sense-making. But when you read about leaders and you read about leadership, you don't hear a lot about sense-making. You hear a lot about visioning and motivating and inspiring others, but not a lot about sense-making. And Deborah Ancona calls this the hidden part of leadership. So what are some tips for effective sense-making to really understand what's going on? It's kind of like putting the address in MapQuest, is that you will get a map of where you want to go, but unless you tell it where you are, you can't find out how to get there and what the route is. And sense-making will also help you figure out, you know, are there detours, obstacles? Is there a scenic view? Do you fly? Do you drive? Do you walk? That type of thing. It helps you figure out what's the terrain that you can map out to figure out how to get where you want to go. Some tips for effective sense-making is to collect as much data. We're at MIT. Collect as much data as you can about what's going on. And particularly if you're working with a member organization, a volunteer organization, you want to find out about your members. Find out about them. And there's many different tools, easy tools like Monkey Survey and stuff that you can do, simple surveys of your members. And it does not have to be highly rigorous and qualitative and stuff. It just can be very simple ways that you figure out what's going on. Be member interviews, focus groups, you know, before and after your different activities, you want to sit down with a few people and talk with them about what's going on. Find out what it is that they want, what's important to them. Find out about what's going on in their lives at this point. And you really want to develop a profile of your potential membership base. I would guess that the alumni based in Southern California may be, and what they're interested in now may be slightly different than the alumni base in New York and Wall Street, but that's just a wild guess, especially these days. So, and one of the things that we did with the MIT Club of Boston is one of the things you can use what's already there. I mean, we because we are here in Cambridge, we were able to take advantage of the resources at the MIT Alumni Association, but it's their job to keep their fingers on the pulse of the organization, so they understand and know what MIT alumni are interested in terms of getting engaged and volunteering. So use them as a resource. Conduct a survey, but if you do a survey, make sure that you use it. We had a very detailed alumni survey in our area, but we never used the data. So we took a much closer look at that, and what we found out is that there are a lot of recent alumni who are engaged with the organization and a lot of people who are advanced in their careers. But there seemed to be a dip in participation, membership, in the people who are in their 30s and early 40s. And so the closer we took a look at that, we found out, and this is true with a lot of arts organizations, is that dip in participation at that stage of your life is that you're very busy with your career and very busy raising your families. These people still want to be involved, they still want to be connected. So it's really then trying to understand what kind of activities do you want to be involved in, or when should we offer these activities to make it easier for you to get in and out and still run your very effective, very busy lives. Another thing that you want to do is talk to as many people as possible, and I think in terms of doing focus groups or member interviews, it's very important to do. And here you are at another, at the Alumni Leadership Conference, you're talking to other club officers and other organizations, finding out what it is that they're doing, what works, what doesn't work. There's no sense reinventing the wheel. So, and don't just rely on who you talk to this weekend. Get their email addresses, their contact information, and keep in touch with them to continuously, tap them for their expertise. But you also want to be aware of too much sense-making, or what we call analysis paralysis, is that you can spend a lot of time, doing a lot of data analysis and cutting and all that kind of stuff. But sometimes the best way to find out what works is to take some action. So if you have an activity and said, let's try marketing it this way and see what happens. Well, that didn't work. It didn't really increase our participation. Or I'm not sure alumni would get into this kind of activity, so let's hold it and see who comes. Is it recent alumni? Is it people who are more advanced in their career? So you get information, but just trying something and taking action. Relating. You know, as the title of this talk suggests, this is about, leadership is not a solo sport. It is really about engaging and working with others to work with you to get things done. So relating really talks about how do you develop effective relationships with people and engage them to work with you. When the faculty teach this 4 capabilities model, I mean, there are many aspects of effective relating, but they focus on 3, and that's inquiry, advocacy, and connecting. Now, inquiry and advocacy are terms that have been coined by organizational development experts Chris Argyris and Don Schoen. Inquiry is about really focusing, really with the intention, trying to understand the other person's point of view. Oh, by the way, I see people taking notes. There is a handout here for effective sense-making for all 4 capabilities in terms of tips in organizations. So if, yeah, that'd be great if you could hand those out. And if people want copies of my presentation, I believe it's going to be on the web, and I also have plenty of business cards, so if you want to talk to me afterwards, please feel free to do that. But going back to relating, inquiry and advocacy. Inquiry is really about trying to understand with genuine intention where another person is coming from. How did they come to their particular conclusion based on the data or information that they have? So you want to be asking, you want to not say, that's a really dumb idea, this is how things are really like, but you want to suspend judgment and really sort of probe and explore more in terms of where they're coming from. Tell me why you think that's important. Tell me more about how you came to that conclusion. And that will give you a little bit better understanding of where other people are coming from. Advocacy, leadership is about taking a stand. And advocacy is really about getting other people to understand where you're coming from. Now, this is not just about announcing your conclusion. It's really about explaining your reasoning about how you got to your conclusion from the information that you have. And when you're trying to get people to work with you, the more detail you can give them about why and how you're doing something, the easier it will be for them to figure out how they can help you to make it happen. So the problem with many relationships is that we spend more of our time on advocacy than we do on inquiry. More time trying to get people to understand where we're coming from than where they're coming from. And Stephen Covey in his 7 Habits for Highly Effective People said that when you have 2 people trying to advocate for their own positions, you have a dialogue of the deaf. So you really want to focus on trying to get to know where other people are coming from. And so how I did that in the MIT Club of Boston is that I like to sense-making and relating very much go hand in hand. So when you're out talking with people and cultivating those relationships, you're also collecting information and building relationships. So one of the things I did at the MIT Club of Boston, I've done this a lot in my work, I've done this with a lot of organizations that I'm involved in. It's very difficult to bring, especially a group of MIT alum together in a room and trying to get them to agree on something. They have lots of perspectives. It's like MIT faculty bringing them together and trying to get them to agree on some particular line of action. And so what I do is try to establish relationships with people one-on-one. And so I sit down with them. When I first came on as president, I would sit down with them and ask them a set of questions, such as, what do you think is the purpose of this organization? Why should people care about this and want to get involved? What do you think are the biggest challenges that we face? And how do you think we should fix them? What do you think the goals of the organization should be? And what do you think the activities and services of this organization should be? And that is doing effective sense-making because you're getting lots of really good and interesting ideas. And you're also building relationships because people are being given voice to their opinions. Because in a lot of when you get people together in a group, people often say things differently or not at all if they're in a large group. Especially if you have a couple people who are sort of dominating the conversation with really strong ideas, and the people who are less likely to speak up think, I think this is a good idea, but I'm not really sure. But if they've had the opportunity to talk it through with someone else, then they feel that they've had their say in this. So then what I usually do, not just doing the sense-making, the relating, but also doing some sense-giving, is do synthesis of what it is that they told me. And I usually see themes about what people think are the main priorities and what the challenges are and what are the types of things that we should be involved in. And so you usually then can tell people, this is what most people said are the top 3 challenges. This is what our goals should be. These are some of the ideas that people had. So instead of people jumping in trying to get their point across of what they think is most important, instead I see nodding heads from people, and they go, yes, okay, and then they also recognize that they've been heard, and so then they're able to jump in and go to a deeper level of discussion about how to actually address the issues and concerns that you brought up in the organization. And that builds more buy-in in terms of your relationships. The other part of effective relating is connecting. And that is really building a network of confidants that you can call upon. That you have a lot of people that you connect to at this alumni conference. Don't just wait till next year to connect with them again. Use them on a regular basis. Use the MIT Alumni Association. Use the other people on other nonprofit arts, boards and your community organizations that you're involved in, because how do you deal with this challenge? How do you deal with this issue? How have you worked this out? Jim Collins, who wrote the book Good to Great, I just read this recently. He has a list of people he calls his personal board of directors above his desk. And so when he runs up against a challenge and wants somebody's opinion, he thinks about, well, what would this person tell me to do? Or he gives them a call and finds out, what would you do in this situation? So it's kind of nice to be able to call upon someone else to sort of bounce a few ideas off. But that form of connecting, I think, is really important. And I think, Alan, you've talked about, if you're working with other community organizations, vendors, and businesses, is also trying to connect a network of the people within your community who will also help provide resources and talent and stuff.
Send that information these people. They might be from Wisconsin. I mentioned 3, and just so they know where we're coming from.
Right. So you're sense giving as well as sense making and build. Right. So you're developing effective communications that's ready to provide them with some information going back to. Okay. How are we doing? Half an hour. Okay. Effective visioning. If sense-making is about mapping what is, visioning is really about mapping what could be. What is the future possibilities? And I think one of the greatest reasons why organizations falter is because they don't have an answer to the very basic question, is what is the purpose of this organization? Why should people care? Why should people get involved? And that can be a dynamic, changing things that will change as your organization changes and as your membership base changes. I used to be the editor of a lifestyle section at a daily newspaper. I used to work with about 300 different organizations, and they used to come in and say, we want you to publish an article on our organization. Okay, why? Well, because we want publicity. For what? What is it your organization is trying to do? Are you trying to build membership? Are you trying to raise money? Are you trying to get people to come to events? Are you trying to get people involved? And most of the time, they didn't have any thought about what the answers to those questions were. And so before you can figure out, how do we market and promote the organization? How do we build membership? How do we develop programs? You really have to understand, what is it you're trying to build and create? And who are you trying to serve? And the clearer that you can get about that, the more effective you can do in your other planning. Lily Tomlin once said, she said something to the effect of, I always wanted to be somebody, but I see now I should have been more specific. So you need to be more specific in your visioning. In the MIT Club of Boston, we really wanted to foster connection and interaction with the alumni in the area, and we wanted to continue to develop their experience. Are we out of time? Association with MIT. And because we were in the Cambridge area, we had a greater opportunity to continue to engage people and get them to interact with MIT. But through social socializing, networking, and through education. So that was sort of our general purpose, but we got more specific with our 3 goals that we talked about in terms of building membership. And we wanted to really build engagement, because for me personally, just attending events really doesn't get me really excited about an organization, and it doesn't necessarily get me to know who the other people are in the organization. It gets me to hear what the speaker or whatever the program is about. They don't always necessarily get an opportunity to get to know the people within the organization. So I like to get more involved. And so that's really what we set out to do when we got more specific with the Boston Club in terms of what we wanted to accomplish. A vision helps you stay focused. Because when we decided we were going to focus on building membership, we're going to focus on building volunteer engagement, that helps you focus on what it is that you're going to do and what it is you're going to let go. When I was a Sloan Fellow, when I was at MIT, they told me to practice what they called selective neglect. If you try to do everything, you're just going to burn yourself out. And so you really want to focus on what's the most important things that we're trying to accomplish. And your vision is dynamic. So when we built the membership, so clearly we had to focus on what are the activities that we need to do, what are the processes and stuff that we need to put into place to get people to sign up to become members. But then when we made our goal, then we took a different look at membership, and that was like, how do we retain members? And how do we make sure that members keep renewing their membership and not just going after new members? So that helps to be really specific about your goals and how they change over time. We also, we wanted to recruit and engage more volunteers. So it really, in terms of, but what kind of volunteers? Are these going to be recent alumni? They're going to be people who are mid-career, people more advanced in their career? So we had to focus on what kinds of activities, because one of the things we wanted to do is build the young alumni base. Because at their board meetings, we had this young alumni representative show up at the board meetings and then would disappear. But, you know, because we never had any vision or goals to building the alumni base. So we gave that person a job, got them engaged, helped them build a team, and that became one of the most popular and active parts of the organization, because we've decided this is what is one way of getting this base of members involved. And inventing. Inventing is really about translating your vision into an effective action plan. And it's not just about implementation, it's really about creative execution. It's really about coming up with new ways of getting things done. And to realize a vision, people can't just keep doing what they've always been doing. There's a philosopher that once said that if you keep doing what you've always been doing, you'll keep getting what you've always been getting. So you really want to start thinking about new and different ways that you want to do that. So one of the things that we did when we wanted to build our membership was, well, we looked at the structure and build membership and engagement. We looked at the structure of our board. One of the ways that you can invent things is, how are you organized? And so we looked at, you know, of course we needed, if we're going to increase programs, we need to look at what kind of programs and how do we organize a team around that. We want to look at building membership, so clearly we had to have a strategy around building membership and the marketing to go along with that. So we actually engaged someone who was a direct marketing expert and also an MIT alum, so who worked with us in putting together that strategy and game plan. So that's one way of, it's like, how do you structure your organization, your board, in order to accomplish the goals that you're trying to achieve? And you want to build the supporting structure. And you want to broaden the recruiting. I was talking to Sarah Hendrick before this, and she goes, you always go to the people who are the busiest to get people involved. And actually, one way to do that is to contact the MIT Alumni Association and find out who are the active alumni in your area who are not involved with your club, and get them involved. That's one way, but I guess you risk burning those people out even more because they're more involved. But that's one way. But look at the people who've been involved in the past and who've gone off to do something else. Get them re-involved. We established a past presidents club and got them engaged in select activities within the organization. They'd gone off the board, you know, they spent their time, but we brought them back to get them more engaged. And give people a job. You know, don't just recruit them into the organization, but give them a job to do. And what we did on our membership forms was ask people to fill out and indicate whether or not they were interested in volunteering and what activity they were interested in. Then nobody followed up with them. So if you're going to ask people to get involved, follow up with them. And one of the great ways to broaden your recruiting is to do a phone-a-thon. Get on the phone with people who've been members and just say, you know, glad you're a member, thanks for your participation, and just ask them their opinions and their ideas, and would they like to get involved, and how might they like to get involved. It's a great way to do sense-making, it's a great way to do relating, it's a great way to recruit people, because people like to be asked. They show up at an event, gee, I'd like to get involved, but I have no idea how to do this. So at the beginning of every event or activity, you stand up and announce, you know, these are the kinds of things we're doing, these are the ways that you can get involved in the organization. We did that in our newsletters, in our emails, and communicated to people the different ways that they could get involved. Another way to get people involved is to have them get involved in a one-time project instead of a committee. You know, I've been on the arts board of the Art Center where I live, and one of the things that we did is just that we were running into the same problem with our board was our main core of volunteers. But it's like there were people in the community who brought specific expertise, and we assigned them a task in terms of help us figure this out, or help us put on this event, or help us develop this marketing membership campaign, and help us figure that out. We had a past president who we wanted to put on this major networking event with the president of the Alumni Association, and he headed that team, pulled it together. It was probably one of our most successful events with about 300 alumni and staff in the organization, and he loved it. But he just didn't want to be on the board anymore, but he wanted to be involved and engaged. We'd give them a project in order to help them do that, is one way. It's just inventing new ways of engaging people and broadening the involvement. And get people involved in planning. One of the things the MIT Club of Boston that we started doing, and I think they still do it today, is that we invite people to a very informal evening of pizza. Kind of reminds you of when you're an MIT student. Come in for pizza, hear about what's going on in the organization. If you get involved, you know, these are the kinds of activities that we get involved. These are the ways that you can get involved. And then, gee, if you're interested in membership, if you're interested in programming, if you're interested in alumni activities, go sit with this group of people and brainstorm ideas. So we got great ideas from people, and people who are really passionate about their ideas usually step up to actually get engaged. And you usually have the start of a team sitting around the table. And somebody's asked them to participate, and it's a great way to engage people in involvement. Questions on any of those activities? Yes? I guess there's mics on the side, because I think they're also videotaping this.
In the sense-making area, there's a lot of, it seemed like there was a lot of information there about data gathering. What about analysis, right? This is MIT, after
right.
all. And we like to do analysis. How do you see that fitting in, and how do you see that, you know, how do you make sure that analysis doesn't fall off with all this great data that you've gathered?
Right, I think that's a real important point. It's sort of you don't just gather, but you analyze the information. That's why we had done an extensive survey of our Boston membership, and then the data just sat there. We didn't do anything with it. So that's where we started analyzing it much deeper, and that's one of the things that we discovered is that we had people dropping out in that age 30, early 40s kind of. And we started understanding in terms of why they did that and how. So that, you know, it's really taking a closer look at terms of how is that going to help you. But in terms of if you're clear about your visioning as well, it helps you figure out, you know, like if we decided we want to engage that group of people, still keep them connected. So we had to do deeper data collection to say, what kinds of programs do you want? You know, is it better to hold them in the morning? Is it better to hold them right after work? Is it better to have them at lunch? Where in Boston is it best to hold these things? And so that was collecting additional data to get more specific information to help us achieve our objectives. Yes?
I was wondering about, you get people, you ask them what kinds of things to do, you engage them on a particular task, because that is much less threatening than asking them to be on a committee. But how do you make a team of that? What kinds of things do you do with those individuals? And one thing about MIT people is they can all handle anything on their own. And they get it done, and they get it done beautifully. But how do you change from being, and how do you encourage as a president or an officer, these people who are coming in, don't have really a lot of time, want to do the
Right.
one-time thing?
I think part of it is that community building activity that we have is that you're bringing people who are talking about different ideas, so you're creating energy around a group of people who are already interested, and a team is starting to form. But another thing that we did was that, this is about organizing according to your activities. In order to engage volunteers, I think it's really important to have someone whose job it is to cultivate and develop volunteers. And we had a president-elect, so it was that person's job, because there's real incentive for a president-elect to get more people involved in the organization, was really focused on developing strategies and ways to find out who wants to get involved and how do you get these people working together on different activities. And part of it is really finding out what is it you want to do, and then trying to match them up with other people who have similar interests and getting them to work together. And you can actually I've been working with a team that I've been helping to coach, and one of the things that the team couldn't come together, they all did their own thing, and I said, why don't the two of you get together and plan the next meeting and co-facilitate and figure out what this team is? And it totally transformed the team to actually, because then they started getting to know each other and how they work together and how they, if they're going to do something together. So that's a good way of teaming some people up. Michael.
In a lot of groups I've been involved with, you have a problem where you're short volunteers, you want to do a really lot. So what you need is more volunteers. But in order to get more volunteers, you need some of your volunteers to work on recruiting them.
Right.
And then you're even more short-staffed in the near
Right.
term. Well, that seems like the right thing to do anyway. Do you have any techniques or methods of how to do that without making things really bad?
That's where planning comes in. I think
That takes more volunteers.
that's right. I think you just have to make that, because if you're not clear about what it is that you're trying to do and organize accordingly, it's a vicious cycle that's going to keep going. And I think that's one of the things that we did. We were very fortunate being right here in Cambridge that we worked with the Alumni Association office who sort of do succession planning, because it's really tough, because it's like, it takes more time. We just don't have time to develop. That's like, for me, it's sort of hiring staff. It's like I don't have time to hire the staff because I'm so busy doing what this new staff would be doing. But it's just, you have to step back. And even if it's appointing one person whose job it is to go figure out where and how you develop volunteers, I think that's an important thing. But to really look at how do you develop. And there are lots of tools and resources with the Alumni Association, and talk to other successful boards. How did you do this? How did it work with your organization? I don't know if we have a blog for people to ask those kind of questions in terms of, I just think that might be, anyway, I don't know if that's helpful or not. It's sort of like, yes?
How do you recruit and develop leaders as opposed to volunteers for tasks?
Who was I talking to about developing a leadership program? Marissa? It's interesting because at the Leadership Center, when we've talked to alumni, they say that their best experiences in leadership development when they were at MIT was as a leader of an organization. Not necessarily in their courses and stuff, but as a leader of an organization. And so there is a lot more effort at MIT to develop different leadership development opportunities for students while they're here, because I think that's an important skill. I guess that's, you might look within your own base, and if there's even like a Sloan Club within your organization, is to pair up with them to do leadership development programs for the members as well as the board. There are resources in your organization and in your communities that have that. So you may want to do some networking and sense making. Like the Boston area has the Arts Council has a training program for volunteers, has a training program for board members. So there are great resources probably in your community and through MIT that you can start developing programs for that. Yes?
Follow up on that point, we have the scenario at our club where a majority of our board members are previous presidents. What can you do about that situation if it develops, and for other clubs, how do you prevent that situation from developing?
Why do you want to prevent it?
If
Or do you want to talk to me about that afterwards?
In our case, we're already in that situation where we're having trouble recruiting new board members, and we're running into trouble with our succession because most of the people who are already on the board have already been president.
So it's that circle, and you just keep recycling your board members. And I think that's part of where you start building that. That's exactly where we were at. And so that's why we started holding these community events. That's why we started identifying the other members in the area who are involved, like in reunion or fundraising or other activities in the area through the Alumni Association, and started inviting those people and holding focus groups. What you just have to do is just like, have people recruit a friend, okay? As board members, you're out to invite 2 other people, alumni in the area, who have not been involved. And we're going to have pizza and have a talk with them and how they might want to get involved. I mean, it doesn't have to be terribly complicated because you guys are very, very busy. It's just like, start with who you have and broaden the network. Bring in 2 people, and we're going to have an event to talk to them about it. That's one of the things that we did, is sort of like bring in somebody that you don't know very well. Yes?
Another thing to point out is that sometimes no means, no, I can't do it right now, but if you ask me in a year or 2 years, I might be able to do it then. And, I think there's a couple of times where I've had to turn down an opportunity to volunteer. I never heard from the organization again.
Right. Keeping track of them. I'm interested in hearing from you guys in your ideas, and you can pair off for other ideas, but in terms of some of these questions that have been asked here, what are some suggestions that other clubs and organizations have come up with?
Well, I just would just reinforce what you said.
You're right there. The videotape wants to get it on it.
I just want to reinforce what was said earlier about having somebody devoted to volunteers. I'm speaking from the standpoint of the Enterprise Forum down in Atlanta. So we have a vice chair who's actually in charge of volunteers and a membership chairman, and they do different things. And we call this vice chair the Velvet Hammer. So he goes and he has breakfast with people and ropes them in to become involved in the organization.
So how difficult was that to do if you're, so busy that you don't even have time to come up with a volunteer chair?
Then you have a challenge. But somebody has to be skilled in wanting to build those relationships and take the time to find the right people to sit on the right seat of the bus.
Yeah. Do you want to go up there, Ellen?
I have to go up here.
Does someone else have ideas in terms of ways to share this? Because I think you guys have probably some of the best ideas.
Mary, I'm here now. We've had a couple instances where somebody has said, well, I can't do it right now, but maybe later. Mm-hmm. What I've done is then asked if they would like to be on our email list for the minutes and be made aware of what's going on. What's happened is, Kay became an official board member this year, but for a year she was on the email list offering comments and suggestions, but not, taking the responsibility of being an official board member.
That's an excellent suggestion. That reminds me of the arts board that I'm on. It's sort of like there's one who's a really good expert at fundraising, and she just didn't have the time to be on the board. But whenever we did fundraising strategies and plans, I'd shoot the plan to her, and she'd get back with input. It was a virtual member, and she was very helpful in terms of, so there's ways of engaging people virtually, whereas I want to get involved, but I don't want to spend a lot of time. So with our tools of technology, I think there are ways to still get their input and involvement.
That can be more valuable when board members who attend the meetings and
Yes, that's true.
I'm active in town government in a New England town, and much of what we do is done by volunteer committees, but it's often hard to get leadership, which is what we're trying to do.
Right.
One of the techniques we use is you get a group of people who are willing to at least be on the committee, and you pick out either a board member or someone and say, this person shall be the chair of the committee and someone else will be the secretary. You have to have both. But within 2 months, the committee shall select its own leadership, and these two may not succeed themselves. So that gets everybody in the boat and floating and knowing one another and working and so forth. And the captain is taken off the ship 2 months into the voyage. But by now, they know the job. They're a little bit enthused.
Right.
They're into it, and they have to find someone. And that's the way. And some people that I would never have suspected sometimes step up and take over chairmanship or whatever. And in that way, you can find someone that never would have volunteered to chair that committee at the start.
So you volunteer them to start?
No, not them. You put someone in, like a board member
Yeah,
or a
okay.
selectman in our case.
And then you
that
identify the leader who emerges.
and then the group identifies the leader who emerges, but must emerge because this pro tem chair and secretary are taken away into the job. That works best on short-term things that have a beginning, a middle, and an end, not an ongoing committee thing.
Excellent.
Two pieces that I think have been effective. One is when you're trying to find leaders of the organization overall, is looking and trying to differentiate those people who like particular tasks and they like doing those particular tasks to those people who start to show some indication they really care about the organization or they care about the vision or the purpose of the organization. That they're the type who are then going to be likely to be more motivated to step up into those higher leadership roles. The other aspect that I've dealt with in some cases is if you identify a person who you think would be a particular good leader, but you know that they maybe have some resistance to stepping immediately up into that, is to first instead get them to agree to find someone to be that position. Now, sometimes they ultimately then come around and that they then step up if they can't find someone else to be involved. But that is a little bit easier for them to make a first step commitment to. And it's a little bit of the opposite of the approach there, and it's a little bit of a trick in some ways, but it helps.
I think also that reminds me too of like, you keep recycling the same board members, and and how do you, if you don't have time to develop that, it's like you ought to think about what it is that you're doing. You need to scale back and focus on, okay, we don't have a big team here, so we're going to do what is manageable for this team. And I think that was one of the biggest challenges on this arts board that I was on, is just that we came up with all these wonderful, great creative ideas, and we tried to do them all. And sort of, instead of focusing on what are we going to try to do in the next 6 months to 12 months to really build this up, and let's focus on that and identify what it is that we need and who we need in order to make it happen. So I think that is sort of like, if you got too much to do and not enough people to do it, then you got to scale back what you're doing to get it more focused. Yes?
So one question I have is that everyone's talking about it's hard to basically develop good leaders to be volunteer organizations. So is there a good way to basically create a plan for leadership such that young volunteers basically have a way to develop these skills that are complement to their day jobs, so that it's not a completely new task that takes a lot of time, but rather if you can do this thing on the side, it'll complement your career growth and all your day jobs. So that way it's a good for both worlds kind of thing, rather than taking on too many tasks at once and burning yourself out.
So are you asking, is there a way?
I'm asking, is there a good way to do that that will basically help the organization that you're organizing with, which is the various alumni clubs, but what you're doing and the experience you're gaining through that will also help you with the day job.
Oh, I see. So you're getting your experience developing your leadership skills that you can transfer and use somewhere else. Yeah, I think that can be one of your programming, is that you offer some kind of development for your leaders. There are probably a lot of coaches and organizational development experts in your area who would love an opportunity to get an audience or practice some of these things and if you can set up a retreat, a half day or whatever, to work with your board, and that one of the benefits that people get by engaging in this is getting that kind of leadership training. I think that's a real motivation to get more people involved. Does anyone else have comments about ideas about that?
But another thing, I suppose you want me to go back up there.
You know, people can hear you.
I didn't know my voice was that long.
I would like to add his comment with the mentorship. Facilitate and have some mentorship. A lot of people are worried or, nervous about starting and getting into that leadership position. By exercising that leadership and facilitating with them to slowly bring it up to speed is a good one.
So mentoring, having people mentor and coach each other. Okay.
Okay.
Alan?
Well, the Wisconsin Club has an outreach program, Technology Achievement Awards. We honor people who are not MIT alums, local panels for Enterprise Forum. We get people who want to help us and they're not MIT alums. Our bylaws don't allow them to be, but they want to be involved. And we've got 2 people in the Fox River Valley, Oshkosh to Packerland, who actually are very helpful in providing ideas and helping implement them. So you don't need to have board members who are MIT alums to carry out plans.
That's where sense-making, relating, and developing other resources in town beyond your organization, especially if, like in Wisconsin, if your membership is spread out all across the state and you're not concentrated like we are here in Cambridge and Boston. We have 2 more minutes. Does anyone have a burning desire to share their great insight or question? And I have business cards, and I was talking to someone just before this program started about how to develop leadership development tools and stuff. So if you want to take my business card or whatever, I'm happy to sort of discuss ideas about how we might do more specific kind of board training kind of activities within your organization. Any other questions, thoughts? Thank you.